honored to host the Flags of Honor, the Through the Eyes Traveling Museum, and the Vietnam Memorial Moving Wall. The Flags of Honor consists of 1,588 American flags, each flag representing one of the prisoners of war and those missing in action. There is a name tag attached to each of the flags. Today we are honored to retire one of the flags for a member of the Air Force whose remains have been recovered. In front of the American flags are 50 state flags. Attached to those is a label indicating how many deceased are on the Vietnam Wall from that state. The Through the Eyes Museum is a tremendous creation by John Hosier, who served in the 173rd Airborne Brigade. The museum contains photographs taken by John while in Vietnam, along with over 2,000 Vietnam-related items. The moving wall is a half-size replica of the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C., and has been touring around the country for over 30 years. We are honored to provide a home for the wall for these 5 days. A Catholic cemetery is a place of prayer and a place to remember. We come to a cemetery to visit our loved ones' graves, to pray for them, to remember the imprint they have left on our lives, and to share stories of our loved ones with generations of family members. It is therefore fitting to bring this wall to our cemetery. Even though they are not buried here, we have the opportunity to pray for them, to remember the imprint they have left on our lives, the lives of those who serve beside them, and the imprint they have left on a grateful nation. Thank you. If you are able, please stand for the posting of colors by the Color Guard from Abraham Lincoln National Cemetery and the Naperville Honor Guard, followed by the singing of the national anthem by Jim Corneliuson.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light, oh, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
At this time, I would like to welcome Navy Junior ROTC Cadet Stephanie Camarena for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. As I mentioned, in the field of flags, the flags of honor, we have 1,588 flags. This past July, it was confirmed that they did find the remains of a Air Force member. So at this time, I would like to call up Ken Ikello and Ray Arias to retire that flag.
One 1,588 flags represent a POW MIA from the Vietnam War. We have been notified that the remains of Major Neil Clinton Ward have been recovered. We will now remove the flag from the field. Major Neil Clinton Ward was a member of the United States Operations Squadron, Nakhon Phanom, Royal Thai Air Force Base, Thailand. On June 13, 1969, he was flying in a Douglas attack Skyraider A-1H on a mission over Laos when his aircraft was shot down. His remains were not recovered at this time. Between 1993 and 2018, joint U.S. and Laotian teams traveled to Laos and excavated the crash site associated with this loss. They recovered human remains, Major Ward's military identification card, and life support items. These remains and artifacts were brought to a DPAA laboratory and were subjected to forensic testing and historic research. On July 19, 2019, the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, DPAA, announced that the remains of Neil Clinton Ward had been identified and accounted for. This has been laid to rest and with military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. Will everyone please rise as we place the flag for remembrance? Thank you.
Please allow me to introduce Julie Beasley, Vietnam veteran, to recite a poem, I Am a Veteran, by Andrea Christensen Brett.
I Am a Veteran by Andrea Christensen Brett. You may not know me the first time we meet. I'm just another you see in the street. But I am the reason you walk and breathe free. I am the reason for your liberty. I am a veteran. I work in the local factory all day. I own the restaurant just on the way. I sell you insurance. I start your IV. I've got the best looking grandkids you'll ever see. I'm your grocer, your banker, your child's school teacher. I'm your plumber, your barber, your family's preacher. But there's part of me you don't know very well. Just listen a moment. I have a story to tell. I am a veteran. I joined the service while still in my teens. I traded my prom dress for camouflage greens. I'm the first in my family to do something like this. I followed my father like he followed his. Defying the fears and hiding my doubt, I married my sweetheart before I shipped out. I missed Christmas, then Easter, the birth of my son. But I knew I was doing what had to be done. I served on the battlefront. I served on the base. I bound up the wounded and begged for God's grace. I gave orders to fire. I followed commands. I marched into conflict in far distant lands. In the jungle, the desert, on mountains and shores, in bunkers and tents, on dank earthen floors, while I fought on the ground, in the air, on the sea. My family and friends were home praying for me.
Our keynote speaker, James R. Zwitt, was born on Saturday, February 3rd, 1951 in Evergreen Park. Jim grew up in the city, attending St. Bede the Venerable Grammar School, Bogan High School, and then a short stint at the University of Illinois in Chicago. After leaving college, he found employment waiting for him with the U.S. Army. His basic training was Fort Campbell, Kentucky, followed by AIT at Fort Polk, Louisiana. And then, after a 30-day leave, he was on his way to Vietnam, arriving in 1970. He was assigned to the 101st Airborne Division, Northern I Corps, as a machine gunner with Company D, 2nd Battalion, 501st Infantry Division. After 9 months in country, he was wounded in a firefight on 15 April 71. In that battle, his company suffered 8 killed in action and 13 wounded in action, numbers that equaled more than 25% of their company's strength. Although they were greatly outnumbered, the Delta Raiders held their ground that night. He spent the next 18 months recovering from his injuries. After leaving the military, he spent 12 years as a Chicago police officer. After leaving the police force, Jim began his own business, doing investigations for law firms in the Chicago area. He continues to speak at schools to teach the future generations about his experiences in Vietnam and the sacrifices that have been made by our veterans to make this country what it is today. Jim and his wife Grace live in LaGrange Park. He now enjoys spending time with his adult children, Jennifer Hennessy, Jeff, Vince, and Christian, his granddaughters, Skylar, Lola, and Ruby Hennessy. Please welcome Jim Zwitt.
Thank you very much. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I don't need a script for what I'm going to say to you. What I'm going to talk about is going to come from my heart, as it has for all these years. I am humbled to stand in front of this memorial with 58,276 names of American heroes from the Vietnam War, 8 of whom I spent the last day of their life with on April 15, 1971. During that mission, we were assigned to recover the body of a fallen soldier. Unfortunately, we had no idea that we were going to be outnumbered more than 10-1 during this mission. When we made contact with the enemy, we spent 14 hours in hell. 8 of our men were killed, 13 were wounded, including myself. I was carried back to safety by 4 guys, thankfully, and one of the fellows that carried me back brought me water a couple times before the medevac can get there. This individual I had made a pact with earlier in my time in Vietnam, and the pact was that if something happened to either him or me, the surviving person would go home when they got stateside and visit that family and explain to that family what happened and visit with the family. Well, after 18 years of 18 months of hospitalization, I got out of the hospital, and I really, all of my belongings were left out in the field. I had no address book. I had no idea where to find anyone. When I was in Vietnam, as all you guys can attest to, we didn't have names. We had nicknames: Slim, Dirty Red, Tex, Mississippi. You know, we didn't know each other's names. So it was a challenge. I knew Bob Hines' name, and I was going to make it a point to find his mom. And I had visited with a couple of Gold Star families in Chicago. Friends had passed away in Vietnam, and they showed me the telegram that came home with the body. It disturbed me greatly. Those 58,000 names on that wall, those families never got an explanation of what happened to their sons. And I made up my mind then that I was going to find every one of those families and, you know, explain to them and answer their questions if I could. Most of you know, in 1970, we didn't have a cell phone. We didn't have internet. We had 411 on our telephone. We had, different newspapers that we could look up the phone number on directory assistance and call the obituary sections for the city that we thought our friends had passed away from. But you know what happens in Vietnam and when we're in the service? If you live in Aurora, if you tell somebody 10,000 miles from home, where are you from? Aurora. They're going to go, dude, where's Aurora, Illinois? So what do they say? Chicago. They're from Chicago. Well, those are the problems I ran into when I started searching for these families. So Bob's family was the main focus of my search. Through the 70s, I called various places trying to locate any information I could about him. So the 70s rolled into the 80s. In 1986, we had the Welcome Home Parade here in Chicago that some of you guys probably were at. After that parade, we started coming out of the woodwork. I started networking with more people, finding out different ways to, maybe find my friends. I still wasn't having much luck. In September of 1988, 17 years later, I happened to see a periodical with the picture of a fella on the front. He was a newsman in Sacramento, California, which is where I thought Bob Hine lived. And I figured, what the heck? I had no other means to find him, so I figured I'd send him a letter. I found out that this guy was like the Bill Curtis of Sacramento, very well respected, and he was involved in building the Vietnam Memorial in Sacramento. So I know that they reach out to Gold Star families. So I wrote him a letter. About a month later, I get this response. I get a phone call from this fellow, Mike Kelly. He goes, Jim, my name is Mike Kelly. I was with the 101st Airborne Division, and I'm on the committee, Well, I said, I was with the 101. So we started chatting. Well, lo and behold, he was wounded 6 months before me, and the same surgeon that saved his life saved my life. So, once we realized that in our conversation, that bond that us Vietnam veterans have, it was solid. Well, Mike searched and searched the next 5 weeks, and he had worked for the county assessor's office, and he had all the tax rolls. So he said, I'm finding them. Well, he was sending letters and doing what he could, and nothing was working. Well, lo and behold, like I said, the middle of November, he happened to be on a conference call, and they were deciding the parade route for the dedication the following month for the memorial. And during a lull in the conversation, this one fella on the phone says, hey, my brother-in-law from Alaska is coming down to walk with the mother of his friend Bob Hine in the parade. Oh my God. Now, Kelly almost fell off his chair. So he, realized, what was his name again? He goes, Bob Hine. He goes, that's the fellow I'm looking for. Well, all of a sudden, I get the phone call. As a matter of fact, I got a phone call, but it went on my answering machine. You guys remember what answering machines were, right, in the 80s? So I get a call. Oh, Zwick, you gotta call me. You're not gonna believe what happened. I get a second call. Jim, my name is Pat Condren. I live in Fairbanks, Alaska, and I can direct you on finding Bob Hines' mom. Well, oh my God. You know, my prayers, everything that I lived for the last 17 years were answered. So I called up Pat Condren in Fairbanks, and don't forget what it cost to make a long distance call in 1988. Okay, it wasn't like a cell phone where you pay. So we talked for about 2.5 hours. I wasn't sure, we knew each other, we were in different platoons, but I found out that night that Pat had also made a pact with Bob. Maybe Bob had a premonition or whatever, but he also made a pact with Pat that if something would happen to either him or Pat, that, you know, that the other person would contact, you know, the family. Well, now he either didn't trust me or didn't trust Pat. Now that, I don't know what the story was. Well, 3 weeks later, Pat flew down from Fairbanks, Alaska, and I flew from Chicago to Sacramento and met that Gold Star mom. Let me tell you something. It was, if I start crying now, excuse me. She was the most wonderful person, and she wasn't bitter. We read her son's letters that she saved, explained some things in the letters, and she was just the most wonderful woman. And she said, I may have lost my Bob, my only son, but now I have you two as my adopted sons. And that is what it was all about. And once I talked to that mom, I knew from that day on, I was going to find those 7 other families, because that's what it means to them. They need answers as to what happened to their sons. Well, in the next 2 years, internet became more popular and different things, and we were able to find seven total families in the next 2 years through different forms of investigation. We hosted a reunion with some of the Vietnam veterans from my company in '91, and some of those families joined us at the reunion and met the guys that served with their sons and got the answers that they wanted for the last 20 years. There was always one family that we couldn't find, and it was an African American named William Ward. William Ward was from rural North Carolina, and every time we went to look for anything, we just were coming up with dead ends. Well, a lot of the things that happened to me in my life is fate. Fate has driven me, and then things have happened to me, and they happen for a reason, and it's divine intervention. Well, on April 15th, 2011, I met 2 of my friends that were in the battle with me in Vietnam on the 40th anniversary of that battle in Washington, D.C. As I stood in front of panel 4W, praying, laughing, joking, the 3 of us all day, we noticed this African American woman to our right talking with the park ranger. Well, she spoke with him for a few minutes, and she got done with him and walked over to us and excused us and started searching for names on the wall on panel 4W. Well, all of our guys, all 8 of our guys are near the bottom 5 or 6 lines on that panel. Well, when that woman knelt down to look at those names near the bottom, the hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I walked over and tapped her on her shoulder, and I said, "Ma'am, can I help you find a name?" She said, "I'm looking for William Ward." Well, let me tell you something, guys. I didn't know what to say. You know, I looked at the 2 guys I was with. I said, "This is Ward's family." And they were like, they just couldn't believe it. I put my arm around her and hugged her. She broke down and wept on her knees. Well, all of us were crying at that point. And I said, "You know, I am so glad that you decided to come today for the anniversary. And she says, what anniversary? I said, today, 40 years ago today, William was killed in a battle with 7 other guys. And she said, I had no idea. He said, we thought he was killed alone. We weren't given any answers. We weren't nothing. And I said, what are you doing here? Why are you here today? What are you doing here? She goes, this is my daughter. These are my 2 granddaughters. I'm a school principal and a minister in Hampton, Virginia. Today was Grandparents' Day at their school. I decided to take the day off work, take the train, and go to their program. And it was such a beautiful day that, I had to come and see the wall and do a rubbing. Now, that isn't an accident, guys. That's divine intervention, and that's what she said. She goes, the Lord is looking out for us. Well, I'm on the cell phone calling all our guys and everything. Now I don't want to take the plane home because I'm thinking, this is 40 years. I'm like, holy crap! And now I solved all my problems in my life, I think, and I found the family. I said, I want to get on that plane. So I come home, and that Memorial Day, Mary Schmeek from the Chicago Tribune reached out to me and asked me, can she interview me because she would like to do something with the story that I just told you. That's my only script I got right here. Mary wrote a most beautiful article on this whole scenario that I just explained to you. The following year, she was awarded a Pulitzer Prize using this article as part of her works. The most proudest day that I had in 2011 was when the Chicago Tribune had this on their front page. The names of those 8 heroes. It made me so proud. Every one of those families got as many copies as they want. It was on the internet. It went all over the world. And it's just something to tell those families that their brothers, most of their folks have passed. Those 8 and all these others are never going to be forgotten. This wall says it. It travels all over. And it was just something that, I just wanted to share. Now, this is fate. Now, I want to recognize someone today, and this is another one of those fate things. That Pat Condren fella that I told you that maybe Bob didn't trust, that lived in Fairbanks, Alaska, well, he lives in Seattle now, okay? Well, he happens to have family in Wisconsin, and out of the clear blue, he's here today because he wants to support me as I do my speech. Stand up, Pat. Now, stay up. He's old. He's got to sit down. But anybody that grew up in Wisconsin and moved to Alaska for like 30 years, they gotta wonder. You know what I'm talking about? That man, as a 21-year-old, spent 365 days as a combat infantryman. As a 21-year-old, he was given his walking papers to go home to Wisconsin. He had that promise. He had that promise to that fellow soldier that he would see that mom. He arrived in Seattle, changed planes, flew to Sacramento, California, because he had her address. He visited with that Gold Star mom, Catherine Hine Markley, for 3 days, reading his letters, explaining things that she didn't understand, and whatever. Now, that is something that us Vietnam veterans, the camaraderie that we formed there and the bond that we formed there will never leave us. I'm going to finish with the 2 words that all of us Vietnam veterans like to hear and are proud to hear. Welcome home. Thank you.
time, I'd like to introduce Bob Grembler, Navy Vietnam veteran, to come up and recite a poem, Soldier. Bob?
I saw a burial with the bugler playing taps. I turned to my father. What happened? I asked. He clutched my hand with a quiver in his voice. He began to explain and his eyes became moist. My son, he said, this is rather difficult for me. For an old veteran like myself, this is tough to see. In that coffin lies a genuine patriot warrior, an honest-to-God hero, an American soldier. I appreciate that soldier and the service he gave, and I honor his sacrifice as he lays in his grave. He was honorable, selfless, and courageous and bold. Please remember him, son, as you grow old. The value of his service I must explain. If not remembered, will be lost in vain. As a nation, we're nothing without soldiers like him, and failing to remember would be a terrible sin. I listened in awe as my father spoke it. Seemed as if his heart were broke. I suddenly remembered when he went to war, and when he returned, I thought nothing more. And I didn't care about why he was sick. I was too busy enjoying the life that I had to realize that I had because of my dad. And it hurt so bad I cried out loud. He sacrificed so much I could be free, and his battle scars were suffered for me. It was my father's spirit that spoke to me that day. Thank God I finally understood what he had to say. I saluted his coffin as they laid him to rest, and I thought about the medals pinned on his chest. That I didn't honor him sooner, I will always regret, and I pledged that day that I would never forget. I'm proud that my day was a patriot warrior. I'm honored to be a son of an American soldier. And I am a son of an American soldier. My father was a medic in World War II. Thank you.
Now we will have a wreath laying ceremony in honor of each branch of service. Each veteran will be accompanied by cadets from the Proviso West Navy Junior ROTC. Army veteran Bob Royce. Marine Corps veteran Wayne Fisher. Marine Corps veteran Wayne Fisher. Navy veteran Lee Holsworth. Air Force veteran Ray Nozal. Coast Guard veteran Christine Anderson. Placing for the Merchant Marine is Coast Guard veteran Kayla Moreno.
Would you all please rise for the rendering of military honors?